Hey everyone, my name is Chris Hass. I'm a second and third grade teacher in Richland School District 2 and also a area rep for the Midlands for SC for Ed. And we are here for Senate District 34 to talk with candidates a little bit and get an understanding of kind of where they stand on issues of education so that as you go to the polls, you have an idea of what people's beliefs are, their aspirations, and where they see everything headed. We have two candidates in this district. With us, we have Senator Goldfinch, the Republican incumbent. He also has a Democratic person running against him, but unfortunately she's not here tonight. She did not respond to the invitation to join us. So if you'd like to know more about her, feel free to reach out to her. And with that in mind, we'll go ahead and get started. So would you just like to maybe introduce yourself to people who maybe don't know you real well and talk a little bit about your experience in the Senate and your platform that you're running on?
Sure. Again, my name is Stephen Goldfinch. I've been in the General Assembly for 8 years now. I was in the House for 2 terms, and I've served 1 term in the Senate, running for another term. I am married. I have 2 kids, both of which are going to public school. My daughter will be going to first grade at Walkmall Elementary, coming up here in the fall, hopefully. Yeah, I'm involved in the school district quite a bit. My wife is a substitute teacher there, and so I'm very familiar with public schools, and obviously have been involved in the debates around education. It's a passion of mine. I think Republicans have missed the boat on education for a long time. Unfortunately, we've let the Democrats run that narrative, and it shouldn't be a partisan issue. Quite honestly, it should be a bipartisan issue. We should strive to have the best education we can have, Republican or Democratic. That really shouldn't matter, quite honestly. But I do have passions. Criminal justice reform is a passion of mine, and I've worked a lot on that. Flood resilience in South Carolina is a passion of mine. I have a district that floods a lot. Cegledy floods a lot, and a lot of portions of Georgetown flood a lot. And I have dealt with helping those folks move in and out multiple times and rebuild their homes. And so it's a sort of a sensitive spot for me to try to figure out a way to make South Carolina a little more resilient for flooding. I was on judiciary when I was in the House, and I'm on judiciary now that I'm in the Senate. Of course, in the Senate, we have a lot more committees. I'm also on labor, commerce, and industry. I am not in education. I'm on labor, commerce, and industry. I am in judiciary. I'm on ag and natural resources. I'm on fish and wildlife. So fish and wildlife issues, agriculture issues, water issues, flooding, all of those things, and criminal justice reform are all big issues to me, including education, obviously.
Great, thank you. So my first question is, and this is kind of an interesting question because we're in the midst of a lot of things going on in education that is not what we were talking about 5 months ago because of the pandemic, obviously. So we're recording this in July, but some people might be watching it in late October, early November. So speak to this however you'd like. When you look at the state of public education in South Carolina, what are some things that catch your attention, and just kind of what's your assessment of what's going on right now and what we need to do?
Well, I am concerned that the more money we put into, what's considered to be low-performing school districts, things don't seem to get better. I'm concerned about local school districts. I'm concerned about the performance of those school districts, and I'm concerned about, whether or not we're going to have a face-to-face education in the next couple of years, and what that means for students from all different kinds of perspectives. What does that mean for students from an education perspective and going to college? What does that mean from students that may not be treated the way they should be treated at home? What does that mean for students that aren't eating at home traditionally or have food insecurities? So all of those things are concerning to me. I started off with funding. We continue to pour more and more state dollars into funding, and we are not getting quite the results that I would hope that we would see. And I always struggle with the idea of whether or not, or how you legislate personal responsibility. And you can't place the blame on the teachers, and you certainly, up to a certain point, you can't place the blame on the students. And so I always struggle with how you get parents more involved in their child's education, their children's education, because I really think that's the key to successful children or successful parents that are involved in their children's lives. And I struggle with that a lot. I think it could be very helpful if we could figure out a way to involve parents. But we live in a state that is very rural in some places, that doesn't have internet access in some places, that have uneducated parents in some places, and that tends to precipitate more of that, unfortunately.
So when you look ahead to the legislative session that will begin in January, this is a question of priorities. What do you think we need to be prioritizing in regard to education come January?
Well, I mean, we unfortunately had a giant, fortunately or unfortunately, had a giant debate on education last year. So, for about 3 or 4 years, everybody always asked me, "What's it going to be this year? What's the main issue going to be this year?" And for like the last 5 years, I've said it's going to be education this year. And I was wrong about 5 years ago, and then I was wrong about 4 years ago, and then I was wrong about 3 years ago, and finally last year, education reform came about. But you know what? It didn't really go anywhere. It didn't really do what I had hoped it would do, unfortunately. So I voted for a teacher bill of rights. I helped Tom Davis draft the teacher bill of rights. I helped Tom Davis negotiate the bill of rights with the other side, and I voted for it. And I personally think that teachers need that assurance from the government that we stand behind them. I voted for a teacher pay raise. There was, obviously 200 other amendments in that debate that, and I can't recall every single one of them because every single one of them took almost a week, seemed like. But yeah, I mean, I'm generally, if you're trying to figure out where I am, I'm supportive of money when it makes sense. I'm supportive of teacher pay raises, and I'm supportive of giving teachers an assurance, a governmental assurance that we stand behind them.
Mm-hmm. So you've spoken to funding a couple times, and my third question has to do with funding. What, in your opinion, what needs to be done with funding when we think about schools in South Carolina?
Well, it's a difficult question. I think that
I'm sorry, I lost your video. Is that?
Hang on a second. How about now?
You're back. You're good.
My phone said low power. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not a straightforward question. I think some school districts do deserve more funding, and I think some school districts don't. It's just a matter of how well those particular school boards are managing their funds and the things that they have been entrusted with. Quite honestly, some school districts haven't done very well with what they've been entrusted. Now, you may say, well, that's not the teacher's fault, and that's not the student's fault, and that's absolutely true. But the state's dollars cannot continue to be thrown at a problem that can't be fixed with money. We need to figure out a solution to failing school districts. And I'm not talking about failing just from a testing perspective. I'm talking about failing from a leadership perspective. We need to figure out a solution to that. And I don't mind the idea of the state taking over failing school districts because historically it's proven to be a pretty good idea. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to additional funding in some places, but we need to really take a look at it and make sure, Fairfield County's got the most per pupil funding in the state. It's almost $25,000 per pupil. And yet it's one of the lowest performing school districts in the state. Why is that? What are they doing with the money? Why is that? Georgetown County, which is where I live, we get, a little more than $10,000. A little more than 10. We have no industry here in Georgetown County. I mean, we have a little bit of tourism, but we have no industry here. We don't get a local match that makes it up to $25,000. And yet we've got some of the best performing schools here. Why is that? Nobody can tell me. There's not been a study to tell me what makes the difference between the Fairfield County and the Georgetown County. Now, I have speculation. that it's very difficult to attract teachers that are really good teachers to Fairfield County. And I'm not trying to pick on Fairfield. I'm just giving an example. It could be one of 10 or 15 different counties, but I think it's difficult to attract teachers to rural districts. And so I think there probably needs to be incentive pay, even hazard pay maybe, but incentive pay to get teachers going in places where they wouldn't normally pick to go. And, that could be in the form of tuition repayment. That could be in the form of additional salary, higher salaries. But something needs to be done to try to figure out why we're spending a lot of money in some places that aren't performing well, and why we're spending a little bit of money in some places that are performing very well. And I can't answer that question until somebody tells me, what's behind all that.
So I'll tack on that a little bit. Just you're making a large part of what we've tried to address is teacher recruitment and teacher retention in the state, because we lose a lot more teachers each year than we graduate. I think we're only graduating about 1,700 from our state universities, and they're reporting they're seeing a 30% reduction in the number of undergraduates going into education, which obviously is not a sustainable model for schools in the state. So yeah, certainly very important rural areas, but that's been an issue that we've been trying to address in a lot of places, because a lot of school years we're starting with 1,000 unfilled positions and trying quickly to get teachers into those classrooms so we don't have class sizes that are too large or teachers who are overburdened. But yeah, important issues. So my last question touches on assessment a little bit. How do you think we should be assessing the success of our districts or our schools or our students? There's a lot of talk about testing and different things. What would you think would be an ideal model for us to determine how successful we are being in our state in terms of education?
Job placement. How about that? I say it a little half jokingly, but because you can't figure out job placement for 20 plus years usually, but I'm not really, because testing isn't really the best indicator. And in some cases it is, in some cases it isn't. I know plenty of people that grew up to be very successful people that didn't test well as kids. I know plenty of successful people that, socialized well, but didn't test well, and they grew up to be successful kids. So, testing's not always the best model, but I do think testing's necessary. It's just a matter of whether we need 12 or 13 or 14 ridiculous standardized tests. And I think kids should spend more time getting instruction and, real world learning in a lot of cases. If I had my druthers, I would love to see every kid go through some kind of, can you see me? Okay, sorry, you cut out. I'd love to see every kid go through some kind of an intern program, some kind of not necessarily a tech program, but I think kids need to learn real world skills still. Traditional classical instruction is important, but so is home ec, and so is shop, and so is welding, and so is HVAC work, and carpentry. All of that stuff is important, and I think it's being lost in society. Have you hired a plumber lately? Do you know what plumbers cost?
Yeah, I do.
It's ridiculous. It's good for them. Good for them, bad for us, right? But
That's why people are watching YouTube trying to learn how to do their own plumbing.
Exactly. These guys are charging $100 an hour now. Lawyers don't. A lot of associate lawyers don't get to charge $100 an hour, especially if you're working for an insurance company. So, I think skills and trade is an important part of the school curriculum that's being missed in a lot of places, and I think that needs to be done, and I think less of a focus on testing, more of a focus on real world skills and job placement.
Okay. Well, so, can you hear that?
Yeah, I can hear it.
I'm in my in-laws' house, and the neighbors decided to get a motorcycle, unfortunately.
That's all right.
Are there any last words you'd like to share? Any thoughts speaking out to voters who will be coming out in November?
Well, listen, everybody in my family is a teacher. My mom was a teacher for 35 years. I appreciate what y'all do. It's a hard job, and I truly believe it's gotten harder over the years, unfortunately. And so I appreciate you. I think you're undervalued, overworked and undervalued, quite honestly. And I hope that we can continue to foster better teacher-legislator relationships in the future. And I really think teachers need a raise, quite honestly. And I voted for it. I proposed it. I voted for it. But at the end of the day, teachers are undervalued, and I'd like to just share with everybody that sees this that I appreciate what they do.